Good afternoon and welcome to the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies here at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. I'm really pleased to welcome you today to our next CLGS Queer and Latinx Faith Conversation, which I'm recording today with Rev Rhina Ramos. I'll give a more fulsome introduction in just a minute. I have some housekeeping details for those of you who are here with us currently. We welcome Nicole, or those who will be watching later. My name is Bernie Schlager. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion. And I am sitting in today for the coordinator of our Latinx Roundtable, Reverend Roland Guzman. And so I would like to just let you know that this is being recorded, this event. It is being live streamed on Facebook. And as I mentioned before, it is being recorded for later viewing. We will not, however, broadcast, nor will we record the chat feature. So that is a space that will not be made public. And we ask that you turn off any blurry backgrounds or virtual backgrounds, since that can cause some people problems with their vision or hearing. So once again, we welcome Reverend Rhina Ramos for this CLGS Queer and Latinx Faith Conversation entitled LGBTQ Advocacy in El Salvador. And today, Reverend Ramos will be sharing her experiences working with LGBT communities in El Salvador. Reverend Rhina Ramos is pastor of Ministerio Latino in Open and Affirming United Church of Christ congregation in Oakland, California. Ministerio Latino is a Spanish-speaking faith community that uplifts, embraces, and empowers LGBTQI Latines. She also serves as the national coordinator of Encuentros Latinx, a program of the National United Church of Christ that creates inclusion for the LGBTQ and Latine communities within UCC churches. A graduate of Hofstra University School of Law in 1995, Reverend Ramos also has a Master of Divinity degree from Pacific School of Religion in 2003. She is an experienced organizer in communities, having led programs and campaigns for educational equality, labor rights, human rights of the LGBTQI community, international solidarity with El Salvador, and the prevention of domestic violence. So I am thrilled to welcome you today, Rhina, to this conversation.
Well, thank you, Bernie. Thank you very much, and for this time and for what I would love to share about the work in El Salvador. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us as well. So I will start by saying the reason I do this work outside the US is because I'm Salvadorian, and that is very close to my heart. I was brought to the United States at age 14, but at that time, I had already formed that sense of identity about who I was in the world. And I knew that before anything else, I was Salvadorian. And that was always a sort of great pride that I think saved me as I was growing up immigrant brown in the United States. Knowing that part of me gave me a standing and grounding to face, as you might know, might imagine, discrimination and what have you, as I was growing up in the United States. So we left El Salvador with my family in 1983 in times of the Civil War. And another important piece of my growing up was being a witness of people of faith doing justice work in times when that meant to put yourself in the line and to put yourself in danger of being assassinated, like it happens to Monsignor Romero. So that informed too the way I see what faith means in terms of social justice. So I wanted to give that context to tell you how, as an adult, it came to be that I started doing work of solidarity. I left the practice of law in New York in the year 2000 to move to California. I was an MDiv attorney, and for a long time, I thought that that's what I was going to do with my life, but I got super burned out of fighting with unscrupulous employers who were stealing wages from immigrant workers and not paying them what they were due and stealing overtime. And after 5 years of doing the work, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I decided I was going to move out to California to take a job with this solidarity organization called the Share Foundation. This Share Foundation started as a call from the Catholic Church saying, come and accompany the people of El Salvador because they're killing us. And this happened during the 80s. And so I took a job with them as a community organizer. And my main focus was to start bringing Salvadorians like myself, who had a longing for El Salvador, to reconnect with El Salvador and see the work of economic development and the work of peacemaking. And so that was my beginning of going back to El Salvador as an adult, and also going back to El Salvador as somebody who could bring support to the work that was happening in El Salvador. And then seminary happened for me. And I led one delegation of PSR students to El Salvador for the Share Foundation during my time at PSR. But still, the whole connection with the LGBT community was not formed yet. It was mostly, let's go and support microlending. Let's go and support leadership groups. Let's go and support domestic violence prevention work in El Salvador. And all has been amazing and important, but I wasn't yet connected to the work of the LGBTQ activism until 10 years ago, when ALDES, the Asociación para la Diversidad Sexual en El Salvador, invited me to be part of their board. And they were launching the first LGBT conference in the Catholic Church, a Catholic University of El Salvador, to take place. And that, to me, it was just blowing my mind that that could happen in El Salvador, a place when growing up, I could have never imagined coming out as a lesbian. So, of course, I signed up for it, and I was like, yeah, I'll support you, I'll fundraise, I'll do whatever. Just tell me what I need to do. And I started working with ALDES and their executive director, Ana Montano, and she says, this is what we'll do. We'll bring this conference, they will see who the community is, they will see the activism, it will call to the young people. And it was a total success. It was a sold out event. And I couldn't go, but I was supporting from up here. Then later on, she invited me to come with another group of mostly lawyers. And she says, let's go and train judges in El Salvador so that they know there is an international law that they can use if they want to apply and protect the human rights of LGBT people in El Salvador, because there was no legislation in El Salvador that would protect those rights. But there were international agreements and convenings that could create this work, this avenue of advocacy. So I said to Anna, because she was always convincing me of doing this stuff that had never been done in El Salvador. And I don't know how these women run that organization with a shoestring, you call it, when you have no money, but you dream big. That's how she does it. So I said, yeah, I'll tag along. So I went to this delegation and it was mind blowing. We had 26 judges of El Salvador. We provide them really good lunch at a very nice place because that was attractive. and they came and learned from the mouth of trans people in El Salvador, people from the LGBT community in El Salvador about the horrible conditions they suffer and how their cases of hate crimes are often dismissed as vandalism and they aren't given the proper time and lacking that specificity of what a hate crime is was depriving them of justice. And so we engaged these judges and at least gave them a preview. It was just a one all day. So that started my connection with the LGBT groups in El Salvador, and I started meeting the trans women groups in El Salvador, Concavis, Aspiris. I started meeting with their leaders. I started falling in love with that kind of work. And so that was the beginning of that bridge. And then when Oscar Romero was allowed to be canonized a saint, 2018, I decided that was a time I couldn't miss in my life, that I was going to go there. And then it occurred to me, maybe I'll do a delegation. And I talked to Anne and I said, what kind of delegation can we do? And she said, let's, along with coming and celebrating the canonization of Monsignor Oscar Romero, let's bring a world-known journalist so that he can train journalists in El Salvador. So when they do reporting of the LGBT community, they don't misgender, they don't dead name people, they, the basics on how you will treat the community with respect. And I said, and how are we gonna do this? And she said, we'll do it. Let me write to the New York Times. And, amazingly, we got this journalist from the New York Times board who oversees the reporting from Brazil and South America saying yes to our invitation. And there I was fundraising from here, from there to make this dream happen, but it happened. And for the first time ever, we had 40 people in a room, journalists of different kinds of sources, radio, newspaper, digital, learning on just the basics of how treating the LGBTQ people with respect. And so along with this delegation came people from the religious community because we're there for the canonization. And it was incredible. So all the elements were being put together for us to start also combining faith, combining LGBTQ work, activism. We also ended up doing 2 days of the delegation for environmental justice. So to see how the mangroves and habitat is being saved, because I feel it needs to be combined. If you only get a glimpse of the social violence that happens in El Salvador, it's not complete. And then we fall into the, what happens often, we get one vision of what justice is, but justice is complex and we have to tackle it from different places. So it was very important that people saw too the work of environmental advocacy that was being done in El Salvador. And people were able to liberate little baby turtles, and people got to see the amazing work that's being done to save the earth in that little country that Trump called a shithole. But I assure you, it's a beautiful shithole that is like a really resistance. And if you can copy that model in a tiny country with so little resources anywhere else, we could change the paradigm. I'm convinced of that, if you can replicate that. So that was 2018. Monsignor is now San Romero de las Americas, and we got to see that with our own eyes. While the Vatican was broadcasting, we were in front of the cathedral, the National Cathedral, where the remains of Monsignor Romero are, and we heard the proclamation, and that whole crowd erupted in clapping, in joys, in hugs. I was hugging one of my best friends saying, wow, this happened in our lifetime. And for us Salvadorians who grew up in the 80s to feel the reivindication of, yes, this happened. Our, protector, this person who we love so much, who was killed, is saying, I cannot explain to you how that has marked me and made me, a total advocate for these trips to El Salvador, because now I had to show you the tomb of our santo, now to me it's like, okay, you have to do the pilgrimage down to El Salvador. There is a place there you can go and pilgrimage. And with that, I have a presentation for you. Let me pull it up. Let me see where I have it in my computer, because I have some pictures I want to show you. Okay, I think I pull it up. So this is the most recent trip we did to El Salvador in 2021. I'm about to take a group on this coming year in January. And now we have finally connected with a faith community that is doing inclusion in El Salvador. So much respect for La Comunidad Magdala. They are Episcopalian based, led by a wonderful man, Reverend Alvaro Duran, who started this community of faith precisely to be what many of our churches are, which are inclusive. But to do this in El Salvador is so groundbreaking, and you cannot start imagining the challenges they face. So during the pandemic, I found Comunidad Magdala because everything was connecting virtually. And so I was looking through Facebook and YouTube, and I heard the testimony of this young gay man who was talking about family acceptance and how his mother, a Pentecostal, had come to terms to love him as a gay man after visiting Comunidad Magdala. And I was like, Comunidad Magdala, let me know more about it. And then I started stalking the pastor on Facebook. I communicated with him, and he and I began working together in the virtual work, and he became ministering my comunidad here, Ministerio Latino, being a guest speaker, because everything was Zoom, so he could do it from El Salvador. And he started also teaching decolonizing queer theology in Espanol, and we needed all those courses for our people because it was just so important to have those resources in Espanol. And that created a connection that in the last trip we had a service together, the delegation and the Comunidad Magdala, to affirm the new name and identity of a trans man. So this is the new phase of the solidarity work I'm doing, but I want to show it to you through these pictures, so bear with me. So that was our 2021 delegation to El Salvador. This is the house of Monsignor Romero. Is kept intact as the day when he was killed. March 24, 1980, 6 p.m. He was presiding mass. He was about to consecrate communion, and one bullet through his heart killed him. And the nuns in the complex where his house is clean this place and maintain it exactly as it is the day he was killed. So this is his living headquarters, and we were touring the house of Monsignor, and as you can imagine, the clergy that was with me, it was like Disneyland for them, because they were in the house of Santo Romero de las Americas. And this is the tomb of Monsignor Romero. We had time there too, and we're able to pray there. And it was just a beautiful, I cannot tell you the many times we pinch ourselves just thinking we are in holy ground. And then another story you might know are the Jesuits that were killed in 1989 in the Catholic University of El Salvador, because they had preference for the poor, as liberation theology teaches, and they were very vocal about that. And so there is a martyr museum at the UCA, la Universidad Jesuita de El Salvador, and there they preserve all the items of that horrible night where 6 priests, Jesus priests, and their helpers got killed, and their death is just beyond death. They were killing beyond killing because they just want to destroy their ideas and they didn't know how. So we visited there too. They are buried there. These are their names. We remember them. We pray there. And again, I cannot tell you how transformative this is for the people who come to El Salvador. So that's usually part of what we do. The history and legacy of the martyrs of El Salvador is one of the first pieces of the work we go and see. And then we do the connection with the LGBTQ work. Then we went to see the mangroves and the habitat that's being preserved by environmental justice work. As I mentioned before, I happen to be friends with somebody who runs an NGO now. We used to be in the same middle school together in El Salvador. Now he is the executive director of this great organization in El Salvador. And it's so amazing to be able to have found him and connect the trip to the work that they do preserving the environment in El Salvador. Look at the little turtle. We got to liberate turtles again. Oh, it's so beautiful to see them go to the waves. They just know, even if you put them backwards, they turn around and they know where to go. So resilient. And this is Pastor Alvaro Duran that I mentioned, and this is our time in the service, also blessing a trans man that was the victim of a horrible hate crime. We have time with him to bless him because he could, despite everything has happened to him, he continues his fight in the community. And we asked him if we could bless him because he's always in the line of fire. And let's see. I think it ended there. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the last trip and everything we did. And this time around, when I go in January, we will be meeting with an organization that does reproductive rights in El Salvador, because El Salvador has one of the most terrible anti-abortion legislations that put people in jail for having a miscarriage. So there have been cases of people that go years and years, women that had been jailed for a miscarriage. So we want to highlight that work. And you might ask yourself, what does that have to do with LGBTQ? It has to do because it is patriarchal. It is the institution of misogyny. And so anything that dismantle does give freedom to the LGBTQ movement. And we understand that very well. So that's what this new trip is going to be. It's going to be included in our new trip in for El Salvador this coming January, along with, again, a visit to Comunidad Magdala to tell them that we have their back. We fundraise funds so that we can send funds down to them so that they can pay for rent, so that they can pay for special events. For Pride, when they have special events, we are one of their sponsors. So that's the ongoing evolution of the work, of the connection. And to me, it's super rewarding because it makes me feel like I have a foot there and a foot here. And it makes me feel like I'm doing something for that place of the world that it means so much to me, that is part of my heart. So it's the way I remain connected to El Salvador. But also because I think people need to know these things. I think people need to fall in love with glimpses of what justice can be achieved even with very little resources. I think that gives us hope and it gives us inspiration. And so that's why too I do it. Bringing people, I tell the group, every time I'm doing my orientation, when I have a group in El Salvador, I say, I will make you fall in love with El Salvador. You're not living in El Salvador without loving this country. And I don't have to do much really. They inevitably do. It's just a place that has so much history of resistance.
Thank you so much, Rhina. There are at least two people on this Zoom who want to join you some year in enero, in January to go. I hope to go maybe in, I would love to go in 2024, but in any event, thank you so much. And we'd like to open up the room for conversation. Welcome to Lenia, to Reverend Dan, and to Kelly. Any comments or questions, just unmute yourself, or if you'd rather put your question or comment in the chat, I'll pay attention to that. We could have provided pupusas today, but we didn't.
Right? What is
great
this?
Place. There are a bunch of good places in Berkeley. Any comments or questions for Rhina? I can think of one if I'm, oh no, go ahead, Lenia, you first, please.
You go ahead, sorry, you go ahead.
I wanted to ask, thank you. I wanted to ask Rhina, what drew you to seminary? You made mention of meeting a PSR group, but what, if you feel comfortable talking about what some aspect of your call to ordained ministry, why did you
Yes.
go in that direction?
I was burnt out as an attorney. I told you I left the practice of law and I was like, no. Court and being an obnoxious person is not for me, because you have to be obnoxious to be a lawyer. Let me tell you, to be a lawyer, you have to be more obnoxious, the obnoxious person that you are confronting. And I really wasn't cut out to always be in that mode of fighting, I mean, I'm a fighter, but antagonism and all that. It was really hard. Anyway, plus the cases of exploitation were never ending. So I got so burned out. And I was looking to come back to graduate school, but I wasn't sure what was next. And I had never considered seminary, but a good mentor said to me, what about divinity school? And I said, what is that? And she says, go and audit a class, go and visit a place. And I was still in New York and I went to Union Theological Seminary. When I sat in that classroom, the teacher was talking about how the image of God had changed after World War II and how fascinating it was that the image of God had changed because something that horrible had happened to the world. And I couldn't get enough of the class. And I was like, oh my God, if I'm gonna spend money and I'm going to spend time enrolling in graduate school again, it gotta be a place where I feel so excited because law school had been horrible for me. I was bored all the time. I had trouble going through all the readings. It was so hard. Oh my God. But I finished. I looked, and after the third time, I passed the bar in New York. So, I was like, okay, if going to the graduate school again has to be something that fascinates me, and this sounds like something fascinating. So I got accepted in Union Theological Seminary, and I deferred to come to California to try out this job that I mentioned before on solidarity. And then I was liking California, and I thought, I'll apply to PSR. If I defer Union, but I'll see what PSR can offer. And PSR offered me a full ride. And I was like, I'm going nowhere. This is where I'm gonna stay. Free tuition, of course. So I ended up staying and starting seminary in 2000, just as a way to renew myself intellectually, but I wasn't pursuing ordination. When I started seminary, ordination wasn't in my plans. I did it as a way to renew myself. I love what I was learning in seminary. And then in the back of my head, sometimes I thought, I will think, oh, maybe I'll become a pastor like my colleagues, my classmates. But I was like, but those people have no life. Oh my goodness, no, I want my life. I don't want to be a pastor. And then I would think, oh my God, also you have to be perfect to be a pastor. They pray all the time. I don't pray that much. And, I had been kicked out of Baptist church because being a lesbian, and I was still a Christian, but not knowing what to do with my Christianity. But seminary was perfect for me because it helped me reconciliate my queerness with my spirituality. And that's how it came to be. So it was exploration, pure exploration that got me to seminary. And then it was the need of my community to have a Spanish-speaking, inclusive LGBT faith community that got me to be ordained. That's how it happened.
Thank you. Lenia.
Sorry, I had some problems with my computer. Yes, I had the same question, but it's okay. Thank you for asking. But now I had another one. That's okay. For Pastor Rhina, I am PSR student, first semester, the semester that is just ending. Also, I am from Cuba and lesbian. My pronoun is she, her. Yeah, I know Pastor Rhina. Actually, she's one of the reasons I am here at PSR. So it's kind of my mentor too. So I'm happy to be here in this interview with her. And my question is about the organization that is in Salvador. I would like to know if there is any success about how the LGBTQ community is being treated there by the society and by the government. It's like, for example, are they giving jobs to the trans, or are they still denying jobs to trans people and denying housing to the trans, or is there any success, or at least they have the right to say, hey, to speak up without, taking, like somebody taken to jail or something, or do something against them? That's my question.
I think it wouldn't be fair to answer this question in terms of success, because success, for the advocates that put their lives in their line every day in El Salvador, to be alive every day is success, because they can be killed any minute. Society there is very unforgiving of people who are pushing the binary. Anybody who's pushing the binary is going to be hate. Even people after the Pride Parade, Pride March, they have to fear for their lives, because whereas people who had been taken after one of the Pride March by their neighbors that probably saw them marching in the TV, and then they have been beaten up. So I don't know if success is what they're looking for. I think they are looking for like anybody, just to live a dignified life in freedom and visibility, right? So they have come a long way, but still the fight that is uphill. For instance, this past year, the Supreme Court of El Salvador said they were going to allow for the trans community to have the gender marker of their choice in their IDs and their name of their choice. Many people tried that with their human rights attorneys, and in paper, they got it. But then when that needed it to be implemented and the different other civilian entities that there are there, banks, it wasn't allowed. The ruling of the Supreme Court is not being obeyed. So Lenia, no, they aren't winning, they are fighting. So they aren't winning, but that doesn't mean they don't get to get moments of joy and moments of life. And that is the beautiful thing, that in the midst of all the hate, in the midst of all the aggression, in the midst of all the pushback, there are organizations that are very strong right now, and they are being supported by Europe, and they are being well funded. And that is different. And that, yeah, then maybe you can call that a success, because before there wasn't that type of work. And now they get all the backing from places like the Netherlands, Germany, and the trans organizations in El Salvador are making the issue visible. Now it's very, it's not unusual to see in TV more and more people who are coming out in their gender expression freely. But they are pushing that. They are pushing that. In terms of jobs and education, they continue to be discriminated. They continue to also be displaced internally. What does that mean? It means that they live in a neighborhood and the gangs start targeting the trans men or the trans woman or the gay person there, and they threatened them and they said, you must leave this neighborhood or you will be killed. And then they had to take whatever they own and try to find housing somewhere else in the city and try to hide themselves from that gang. So the displacement is a big issue. And some of the organizations we work with an organization called DIKE, they have a shelter. And they are giving some room to people who are being displaced internally in the country. So sadly, people fight, but this is still a lot to be done.
Yeah, thank you so much. But like you say, yes, I can see this like a success, like the union that are in between the group, the organization, how they get all united to fight against all this danger, this discrimination. It's not the same that just one person, that a group who comes together to protect themselves and to fight for the rights in union, in family. And at the same time to get noticed to the world that, hey, we are here and we are fighting. I thought that's an awesome way of success, that the union among that in the union is, we call in Spanish, I learned in Cuba, is a logo that is in Cuba, en la unión está la fuerza. Is in the union, you are strong when you are come all together. So that, I think that's why also they conquer so much. And another question, do you think that the Catholic Church, at least in Salvador, will be in the near future be open to the LGBTQ community or not?
I don't think so. I haven't seen it stand behind the LGBTQ community. Right now, the churches that have been standing behind the LGBT community are the Lutheran Church, some very few, and this is part of the work of Comunidad Magdala, some Baptist church that have gone through trainings on decolonizing the queer theology, but very, like, you can count them with your hands, and the Episcopalians. There's another group. There is no MCC in El Salvador that I know of. But those I've seen are the groups that have done a lot of the backing. Catholic Church, I think they are just abiding by the agenda of Vatican, which is don't ask, don't tell. At least Pope Francis seems to be like a little bit, he says there's a few things that he's been quoted to say, oh, don't judge, but he hasn't really embraced the LGBT community, and therefore, whoever is the leadership in any of our countries is just gonna follow along.
Thank you for those questions, Lenia. The second one was asked by someone watching on Facebook about the Catholic Church. So we have a number of folks on Facebook. So thank you for joining us. Anyone else with a comment or question for Reverend Rhina? One question I have is, when you go to El Salvador with these delegations, do you travel around the different parts of the country, or are you mainly in San Salvador?
We travel around 1 or 2 days. We go outside San Salvador because we want to see the work of environmental justice, and that usually takes place in the countryside, because San Salvador is pretty urban. So to go to the rivers, to go to the mangroves, to go to all these places, we need to go outside San Salvador, the city. And so we do some travel outside the city. Luckily, right now, we count with Don Juan. He's our assigned driver, and he takes great care of the group. Very experience. He lived in the US for 4 years and then had to return to El Salvador because his mother was dying. And so he knows how to, he just knows. And the beautiful thing with him is that before he didn't know too many queer people. And after I've been hiring him to drive the delegation around, oh my God, that man has had a conversion. He is so queer friendly now. He has no, and this is a macho guy, but he will not have problems wearing the whatever we say, okay, you want a shirt from us? And like, yeah, just will have the rainbow on him. No problem. Don Juan is a lovely man, and I'm just totally feel I can rely on him to protect us, because he will also be sure that he's driving and he knows very well what areas we need to avoid.
Thank you. There's a question from Reverend Ann. Are there special security measures you have to take when traveling in pilgrimage?
So that to have a private driver hired for this, because you don't want to be riding anything that you don't know. So that's number one. The places where we stay. We vet the places. We have worked with the management of the places. We know they will take care of us. They are a well-established business. That's another key. We aren't party animals. So we don't go like, partying at night in places that will put us at risk. Have the body system. Everybody has at least, one person they walk by. And we give a orientation on safety. Don't have phones in your hand. We give that orientation at the beginning of the remain with the group, stay within watch. And the places where we go to, they are places where we eat and all that are, I will not say fancy, because they aren't like fancy, but they are places that will not put us in danger, because they are in parts of the city where people who can afford it can go. So that's another thing we do, not go into sketchy neighborhoods. Although I grew up in a sketchy neighborhood, but I never take anybody to see where I grew up, because I'm like, no, I'm not taking the delegation there. I can be there, but not them. So yeah, sometimes I just go and visit my neighbors, because we still have an apartment where I grew up that my mom had kept all this time. And go and visit them, but on my own, and then I come back to the group.
Nice. And Ms. Ann has another question. A great question. If you could have an hour with Archbishop Romero today, what would you imagine saying to him about the work you are doing?
I will not say anything to him. I will listen to him. Oh my God, any words coming from Romero would be so soothing. I think I will just say, what do you think of this other group that's being marginalized? I will say, you from the pulpit will telling everybody to stop repressing the people of El Salvador. You were telling the army in those times to stop disappearing and massacring towns. So what are you going to say? I think he will listen. What are you going to say about these people who are now being disappeared too, being hate? How are you going to love them? And I don't know, I imagine that his heart will be big enough to embrace us. I want to believe that.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from folks? I'm trying to also keep an eye a bit on the Facebook. Lots of thank yous on there. Well, I want to extend our thanks once again, Rhina, for joining and leading this queer and Latinx faith conversation. buena suerte with your trip in January, and hopefully someday Lenia and I and others will join you to visit that beautiful country.
Yeah, I have an invitation for all of you. Reverend Nicole Garcia is preaching today, 5 minutes. She said to me, in 5 minutes, I'm just getting there. Why do you do that to me? We have Posadas Navideñas. It's the Christmas event of my national work of UCC Encuentros Latinx. And we will have simultaneous translation.
Oh,
So people want to hear the translation in Espanol, you will hear it in Espanol. You want to hear it in English, you will hear it in English. We'll have an interpreter doing this work for us. And one of the messengers is Reverend Nicole Garcia on what gives us hope into the new year. So, and the music is being brought to you by a wonderful, wonderful singer from Puerto Rico who is a young trans man who came out in his Baptist church, and if it wasn't for his pastor, he would have been kicked out of his church. And he tells his story in our new toolkit, the Trans Visibility Toolkit, which is free to be downloaded from the ucc.org website. And he tells his story there, shares it with the world. He be singing the villancicos, the, what do you call villancicos in English? The carols.
oh yeah.
He'll be singing today for us. He's talented. I invite you. All you have to do is connect with me here and I will send you the link. Let
Thank
me
you.
put in the chat my email. If you send me an email now, I will send you the link to connect at 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Today?
3 p.m. Pacific time. Yeah.
Okay, today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll email too. I'll get it up on the website too, or put it on Facebook so folks know. Well, great. Unless someone else had a question or a comment, thank you all for joining us today. And always a privilege to have you with us, Rhina. So thank you very much. And happy holidays to everybody. And thank you for being here.
Thank you,
Take care.
everyone. Bye-bye. Feliz Navidad.
Bye.
Bye bye. Feliz Navidad.
Feliz Navidad.